Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm excited for our guest today. It's a unique content that we're going to cover, unique topic. It is in the marketing realm, but a lot of you are wondering, like, how do I get my name out there? How do I get people to find out about my law firm, about what we do, and how do I get clients to come in the door, book an appointment, and say, where do I sign? Instead of me needing to feel like I'm competing against the competition. And the answer to that is a certain marketing strategy that we're going to cover on today's episode. So I'm super excited to bring our guest on. We're going to do that in just a moment. But before I do that, let me briefly let you know about an opportunity we have here at Profit with Law. So as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast, we help lawyers grow their law firm and become more profitable. And one of the things that we offer is we open up just a small number of slots, 8 to 12 slots a month, where we make our coaches available for a free coaching session for you. So if you're in the trenches, growing your firm and just trying to figure out, like, why have I not got to where I want to go? Or how do I get there faster? Or what am I doing wrong? Or how do I stack up against other law firm owners? You might want to have a conversation with one of our coaches. It's absolutely free. And you will find that session will be probably the most mind-blowing part of growing your law firm thus far. So to book that, go to profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, and book your slot today. Our guest today is Robert Ingalls, and Robert is the founder of LawPods. LawPods is a company that helps law firm owners launch and grow branded podcasts. So I'm going to read you his official bio, but we're going to dive into a conversation with him. You'll learn all about him and how this all works. So Robert Ingalls is a recovering attorney, professional speaker, and the founder of LawPods, one of the first podcast production agencies for law firms. At LawPods, Robert and his team help some of the premier law firms in the world launch and grow branded podcasts that build relationships and drive revenue. Robert's path to podcast producer to the AM Law 100 was anything but direct. For years, he battled anxiety from the pressure, long hours, and constant conflict of a litigation career. When he was finally ready to throw in the towel, he had no idea what to do next. With no business marketing background and only a love for podcasts he discovered while creating a podcast for his law firm, Robert decided to see if lawyers would pay him to help them launch podcasts. With very few takers in the early days, Robert spent 2 years in a corporate banking gig, grinding nights and weekends to finally bring LawPods to life. I can totally relate to this. As a speaker, Robert frequently speaks on podcast content marketing, prioritizing mental health, entrepreneurship, and law office technology. In his spare time, he enjoys teaching podcasting at community events, traveling, spending time with his wife and daughters, and riding his skateboard. If you're interested in learning more about our Elite Lawyer program, it all starts with an absolutely free coaching session. So you can book a free coaching session with my coaching staff where they will spend the time with you to help you understand and overcome the things that might be getting in your way of achieving your success. You'll leave that coaching session invigorated and inspired to be able to continue moving in the right direction. Now, in full disclosure, at the end of that coaching session, they're going to potentially offer you the opportunity to join our Elite Lawyer coaching program. That is the only way that you can get into that. So if that's something that interests you, if you would like some help along the way, then go to profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. Takes you right to a calendar booking link. You got to answer some questions on a form there, grab a spot on the calendar, and there's absolutely no commitment. You just have that coaching session, see how you feel, and then decide whether you want to continue the ride with us. Robert, welcome to the show.
It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. And those reading those bios, I have to give a disclaimer. Hey, I'm about to read a bio because you could tell I'm reading off of a piece of paper. It doesn't do you justice, right? It's the cliff notes, but it doesn't really talk to the passion and the excitement that you have in the day-to-day work that you do. So I want to start off with, having you just let our listeners know who is Robert Ingalls, how, tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got into this, and what kind of difference you're making for law firm owners out there.
Oh, sure. Thanks. It's you used one word in there, I think, that describes me really well, and that's passion. Anybody that knows me really well knows that's what drives me. And I ended up in a law office. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but because it was the easy way. Like that really was it. Like I was interested in it as a child. I thought it was interesting. I come from a very blue collar community, very small town, lawyers and doctors, let them be doctors and lawyers and such. That's what I grew up on. And so the idea of being a lawyer, the prestige in it was big. And so I got into school, I was doing well. And when school was over, I was like, well, what now? Well, I mean, I'm good at school. Let's do some more school. Let's go to law school. And ended up there, started practicing law, and got into it and realized very quickly that it wasn't for me. Just my mental health wasn't built for that constant conflict all the time. I started out in criminal defense. I felt like the bad guy in somebody's movie every day. Every day, someone, whether it be my client or the victim, sometimes the judge, were mad at me. And I don't like people being mad at me. And for better or for worse, that's who I am. And so then I got into just general civil, and I miss jury trials. That's about all I miss. But just all the conflict, the type of personalities you deal with, the deadlines, it kept me up at night. And I was doing the marketing at my firm, and people say, how did you know? How did you know that podcasting was going to come up? Because this is 2015 when I first discovered podcasting. And they said, and I kind of threw myself into it. How did you know? And I said, I didn't know. It's kind of like saying, how did you know that you loved your wife? Well, I met her, and very quickly I decided I didn't ever want her to not be around anymore. And that's how it was with podcasting for me. I just, within 30 days of listening to my first one, I owned the microphone I'm talking into. That says a lot about my personality. Go big or go home. And I started setting up stuff in a mixer and mics in my office at night. And I started setting up mixers and mics in my office, and friends would come over and we'd learn how to podcast at night. And then I started one in the law firm. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. I started interviewing people in the community, and I saw the network effect was probably the first thing that really grabbed me. Was people like state senators would come and talk to me on my podcast just because I had a podcast. There weren't nearly as many back then, but it still, the ability to have a conversation with somebody who otherwise wouldn't have given me that kind of time was really incredible to me. And I capitalized on it. And little by little, I was like, I got to get out of law. I don't love this. And I was so passionate about podcasting. I was spending so much of my time and energy. And I mean, it was like having another full-time job. And I said, I really wonder if this is something that the marketplace will value. I was seeing big companies do it. And I said, I think there's something here. Like, I think that this can be good for search long-term, mm-hmm. like with Google. And so I started just kind of being in the community and helping out and showing people and teaching classes at co-working spaces. And then a lawyer in the community came up to me at a networking event. He was like, I want to start a podcast. Can you help me? Client number one. And then from there, it took a couple of years to really get a handful of clients. But when COVID hit, that's really the tipping point for our company. That's when a national firm, we had come onto their radar just by being everywhere, just showing up. And they had heard our name from like 2 different places. And they were like, let's call this person, because there wasn't a ton of competition. And that was our first national brand that put us on the map. And we've grown from there. But it really is about the passion. I love it. I love what I do. It's a really fun thing, which is interesting because until I was 35 years old, I didn't know I was creative. I would have told you I am not creative. And because that's just how I saw myself. I can't draw, like I'm not very good at playing music. And so I didn't think I was creative. I never took a marketing class, never took a business class. And then here I am, like I run a marketing agency, and I am advising some of the biggest firms in the world on their podcast marketing strategy, which blows my mind. But I mean, I guess for anybody out there who's like, it's too late to do something different, get out of here. Like if you love something, you dive headfirst into it, and it doesn't take that long to get really good at it.
Yeah, I love your story for many reasons. First of all, I have a bunch of friends who are, ex-lawyers. I mean, I guess you guys are always
Recovering, I
lawyers,
think,
but
is what some of us call
yeah,
ourselves.
recovery lawyers. But I know a lot of them because I'm in the information marketing space, right? Like I sell knowledge for money, and so I'm in a lot of these groups where lawyers end up. They start doing other things, I've had some of them on the podcast, like my friend Bobby Klink, who sells legal templates for small businesses, specifically in that arena. Coaches, course creators, membership site owners, things like that. And rather than them needing to hire an attorney, they can simply buy his legal template pack, and be off to the races. So he's not practicing law. It is, it's still within the realm of law. But then there's other friends of mine that one of them is she teaches people who want to run a PR agency how to create and establish their PR agency and be successful. So it's very interesting to see the journey when somebody gives up one thing and goes to something else. What do they go to? What do they really love and enjoy? But our listeners, most of them, love and enjoy law, right? And they're here because they want to grow their law firm. So I want to start asking you questions that I think they're going to be asking to try to help them figure out, is podcasting for me? And how do I get started? And what can I expect? So let's start with this podcasting for me. We can have anybody here, right? We can have somebody who's just starting out. They're going to be a brand new attorney, or a brand new law firm owner. Maybe they have no support staff, or they hire one virtual assistant and they're off to the races starting to build their business, right? Or we might have somebody listening to this who's got a multi-million-dollar firm, many attorneys on staff, and they've got a marketing budget up the wazoo, right? So we've got the whole realm of possible listeners here. Is there a law firm that's too small, that's not ready for podcasting? Is there a specific size where now it's time for me to look at it? Or does that have nothing to do with whether or not somebody should start a podcast?
I think at the end of the day, do you have the money to commit to a strategy? Because if there's no money in the bank account for next month, then I don't know that that's for you. But that's any marketing strategy. There are very few marketing strategies out there that are quick wins. Pay-per-click used to be a pretty strong one. I know that, it's not my area of expertise, but I know it's not as strong as it used to be. And if you're not able to commit, like an SEO strategy, like I talk to SEO firms all the time, if you're not committing 2 or 3 years at a minimum, you're probably wasting your money, right? And that's one of those things I would say, if you're so small that you can't even keep the lights on, and you don't have a line of credit to try to build your business, like any business, sell first, sell, try to get out there, try to knock on the doors, get some revenue. But at that point, then that opens up a different conversation. Now we have it, because really what a podcast is, it's content marketing. Content marketing is, until we can beam things in our brain, which will be content marketing, this is the way we do it. We write words on the page, we make videos, we create podcast episodes. We are getting content out into the marketplace for a variety of reasons. And so any firm that can benefit from content marketing can definitely benefit from podcasting.
So you bring up a really good point, right? So when we're looking at podcasting, it's a marketing strategy, but I have a lot of options in front of me. And the biggest one that lawyers go after first is, because this is what all the lawyer marketing agencies are selling, is SEO. But you and I both know SEO, you may never conquer it. You may spend 3 years working on it, and you still are not going to beat out somebody who's got a bigger budget than you, who's putting out more or better content than you. Or you sign up with a vendor that maybe they're not as great with finding the right keywords, and therefore you might be ranking for something, but it's not for the right thing. So your phone is still not ringing, right? So our listeners have to navigate this conflict of which is the marketing strategy that I should dive into. So tell me why podcasting is something that people should consider for before they go into SEO, or instead of trying pay-per-click, or instead of blog post writing. Or maybe you'll say that they're one and the same, and you should have a blog post with every podcast episode. That's what we do here. So tell me a little bit more about how a law firm owner should think about podcasting as it compares to all these other options on the table.
Sure. Well, podcasting at its very core, because it's content marketing, is something you own and something you can always build on. And that's the beautiful part of the podcast is people think, well, a lot of attorneys now look at it and they're not thinking about it from the right perspective. They're thinking, they'll ask me, they'll say, who would listen to a law firm podcast? Somebody that has a problem. And it's like you see a light bulb go off in their head. They're thinking about making like a regular podcast that somebody might listen to on Saturday afternoon while they're mowing the grass. And I have to tell them, no, like let's shift that frame. If you're a personal injury attorney, someone's on your website because something bad happened to them or someone they care about, and they have questions. And your job with that podcast is to answer those questions and to bring on relevant experts who might be able to answer those questions and speak directly to those pain points. Like they have questions, you have answers. That's what the podcast's primary purpose for a lot of law firms is. There's thought leadership depending on the type of firm you are and what you're trying to do. You might be trying to drive referrals with your podcast, but for a lot of attorneys, they're trying to create content that's going to speak directly to a pain point of a potential client. And we're checking a lot of other boxes there as well, because we were talking about SEO. When we're creating that content, we are going to put that on our website. And just like you said, we're not just going to paste that audio player there and walk away. We are going to write a blog post for it. We're going to describe this episode. We might link to other key resources on our website, anything we discussed in there, any books that we talked about, anything. And we're going to write long form show notes, blog post on there. We're going to transcribe it. We're going to put that on the page as well. Then we're going to take that episode. We're recording the video of it. So we're going to take that and put that on YouTube, and we're going to put that up there with the chapters, keywords. Like we're going to SEO that on YouTube. It's the world's second largest search engine. And then from there, we're going to create micro content from that. You want to pull that podcast episode apart, preferably the video, and turn it into little 90-second clips with captions and your branding, because that's the kind of stuff that actually gets seen on social media. When you post it, it's much more likely to get seen than you dropping a link that says, listen to my new podcast. And even if they saw that link, what are the odds they're going to click on that? Like your new podcast, I don't know you. I don't know what this is about. That's a big friction point. And these little pieces of content, they're going to get seen. So they're going to brand you. And what they're also going to do is they're going to help someone qualify themselves as they see it. They scroll past it, they stop, they see the headline, they see the branding, they see the caption, they go, oh, that actually is for me. Now they can listen to that 90 seconds. And at the end, you've given them a little something, they know a little bit more, and they might go, I need to know more. Now you've converted a listener. And all of this content that you're creating, every single episode you're creating is a gold mine of that kind of content. You might make 1 or 2 videos for when the episode first comes out. Then you hire a bigger marketing team and you say, go back and look at these old episodes. I know there's a lot in there. Now they're coming back with 5 or 6 of those from every single episode. And over a period of time, you have a gold mine of content marketing that you can use forever. You set up a scheduler and get these things pumped out. You repurpose them. You turn them into talking points that you can then use on stages when you're speaking. It's just the amount of content you get from sitting down once a week and talking for 20 minutes. And actually, a lot of the experts that I work with will sit down for 2 hours once a month and knock out 4 episodes. And the amount of content they get out of that 2 hours every month is just incredible.
Yeah, and just like you, I love podcasts, and I got turned on to podcasts earlier than you. 0809 is around when I started listening to podcasts, and if people can remember that far back, we didn't have smartphones yet. So we had the iPod, and I would have to connect iPod to my computer and download the podcasts onto my iTunes
like a
software,
caveman.
and then up, sync it to my iPod to be able to listen to that on the go, in the car, in the kitchen when I was cooking and stuff like that. So my kids, my daughter Mimi works here. She's in her 20s. She grew up listening to podcasts, that because I was listening to them all the time. And, so she knows all my favorite hosts and stuff like that. So what's interesting is that when you listen to somebody all the time, you have an affinity with them. You develop a relationship with them. It's one-sided, but you feel like you know them. You feel like you're best friends with them. So now when they're coming to seek, they're they're not going to want to work with anybody else. They want to work with their friend. They want to work with
Right.
the person that's been in the shower with them, on runs with them, in the car with them. And it really it makes it easier for you to sell anything to them, because you're no longer needing to separate yourself from the competition for the bulk of the sales that are coming in. So it's very interesting where other things where they land on your website, they don't know who you are, right? But here they might land on your website and now they listen to 2 or 3 episodes. All of a sudden, they have a much better relationship with you than they do with 3 other websites they looked at, because there's nothing there. There's no way for them to develop that relationship until they come in for a conference or a consultation.
No, you're
Um,
exactly right, because it's that when you hear their voice, you get to know who they are a little bit. There's some personal anecdotes sprinkled in there. They know that you have a son who plays baseball. They relate to that. They start to understand who you are. They get a bit of an affinity for you. They get your sense of humor, and they start to that know, like, trust. That's what we want, because all we really want is to get them past that friction point. And you're right. When they call and I want, this is who I want to talk to. I understand this person. I feel like I trust this person. I know what they're about. It's big.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we've answered the question of is podcasting for. We kind of talked about the fact that you have to have a marketing budget of some kind that you're going to invest in marketing. If you're not up to that step, you don't have a line of credit, you don't have a way to access funds, you don't have savings, you got to go out and just hustle, hit the streets, shake hands until you get enough clients that you can put some money aside to invest in marketing. What kind of investment is somebody looking at if they want to be realistic about getting a podcast started in the way that you outlined it, right? I don't just want to get behind a microphone, record it, and throw it up there on the internet. I want to have a blog post behind it. I want to have it on YouTube. I want to have snippets that I can then post on social throughout, the week and stuff like that. What kind of budget does somebody need to set aside to be able to have that level of production?
It's that level of production is going to be probably $5,000 to $12,000 a month, somewhere in that range, if you're doing an episode every single week. And it depends on how much you're trying to do, how much help, how much hand holding do you want? Like, if you really want to never think about your podcast except for that 20 minutes that you're talking about it, you're probably on the high end. If you have a little extra time to outline episodes and do a little bit of the work yourself, you're probably in the $5,000 range. And that just, it really depends. The low end, I would expect, if you're going to work with an agency, I'd expect the low end, you're probably going to pay $3,000 a month for a weekly show to get, the things that you need, at least some bare bones show notes, the audio cleaned up, because I think that's really important. This is your firm. This is your reputation. This is your name. Get a halfway decent microphone that's going to cost you like $60 and have someone edit it. Clean it up, make it sound nice, mix in a professional intro and outro with a soundtrack, with some voiceover, something that makes people, it costs you a few $100 extra to do it that way. And it makes people go, okay, these people are serious. They're committed. It's like when they go to your website and it looks like it was built in '01. It's hard for me to feel like I can trust you, because that's what your storefront looks like. You have taken such little care about your storefront that I go, ugh, what else are they taking very little care of? And it's those little things. And I think that's why we've excelled, because that's the little things that we pay attention to as well. We want to make sure that all of your presence is branded well, that it looks good, that it feels good. And I think those little extra steps are going to go a long way. I'm sure that you can get it done like anything else in the world, significantly cheaper, but that's probably what you're going to expect to spend if you're doing it, on a professional level.
Okay. Switching gears here again. Let's just assume that we want to move forward with a podcast. We're going to hire somebody to help us make it happen, because God knows we don't have time in the day to deal with everything that you laid out there. But I know that there's different types of shows, right? So you had mentioned earlier, answering clients' questions, making a show around your topic of expertise. But I know a gentleman by the name of Morris Lilienthal, an attorney out in Alabama, and I don't know if you know who he is, but he has a show called The Mo Show. And he decided to start this show, and it's a local show for his town or whatever, and where he just talks about what's going on. And it's just a meet people in the community kind of show. And he really took off when he interviewed the local meteorologist. So the local weatherman is one of the most followed personalities on
Famous.
social, and he had the weatherman on as a guest, and he tweeted out that he was going on the Mo show, and all of a sudden he he had his place on the map. He actually doesn't even own his own firm, right? He works for a law firm, but he brings clients in just because he's running the Mo show. People know about him, and they know he's an whatever. I think he's a PI attorney. They know that he's a personal injury attorney. So if they have a personal injury matter, they know him, and they'll go to him, and so it brings business into him just from having that. So my question to you is I know there's different styles of show that you can have. How does somebody start off? I'm just making that ultimate decision at the beginning of what kind of show am I going to run. Is it going to be geared to my the practice of law and the specific nuances of my area of expertise, or is it going to be more of a local presence that I just want to get everybody to listen to in my area?
No, excellent question. And I don't think I've been asked that before. And I love the community involvement angle. There's a lot of firms, I've seen firms all over the United States that do that really well. Some of them sponsor these big parties and their name is all over it, and they'll invite all of these different celebrities to it, and their name's everywhere. And they're very involved in their community. And that's kind of the angle of the podcast. Create something people would want to consume outside of you. You just happen to be the person speaking. You happen to be the sponsor of it, but it's something people want anyway. The issue I see a lot of firms run into is that's usually, for some of them, it's not a viable angle. That's not who they are. It's not how they want to spend their time, but I love it. And I always bring it up when I'm discussing the idea is this something we can use? But there you really have to be focused on commitment as well, because if you are creating something that people are looking to as entertainment, as people are looking to for information, that's the kind of thing that you need to be very consistent about. Like, you are showing up. If you are creating a personal injury podcast and you miss a week, not that many people are going to notice, because most people are not following your podcast. They are not having those episodes pushed to their podcast player. So they're not going to see gaps in it. And not that you shouldn't create consistent content, but when you're creating a community show, you have to be booking guests that are relevant. You have to be consistently thinking of content that is relevant, something that I can make. The production value on something like that is higher. Trying to make something like that work. Now, I don't want to talk people out of it because I love it. And I think it's very valuable to develop your brand that way. But especially smaller firms without as many resources sometimes might not be perfect for that. But the right person with the right personality, that's huge. That can go out in the community and speak in a voice people want to listen to, and create something that brands the law firm outside of just you ask, they answer, is immensely valuable. So I very much encourage people to do it. And I would love to have more shows. So if anybody's thinking about that kind of thing, shoot me an email, because I would love to do more shows like that.
Yeah, I love watching the passion rise in you as you're like talking about that style of show, because it's different and it's exciting. I mean, it because you're catering to a wider audience. You're gonna see better growth. Like when typically when a podcast host creates a podcast, the only way that you can measure whether you're doing okay is how many downloads am I getting, right? And when you're creating a podcast where the purpose of the podcast is when people land on my site, they should see my podcast and go listen to it. You're not going to measure your success by downloads, because you're not catering to the broad audience. You're not catering to people just finding your show and saying, "Oh, I want to know about personal injury. I'm going to listen to this," right? Or I want to know more about divorce. I'm happily married, but I want to know more about divorce. I'm going to listen to this podcast, right? So it's very interesting that the purpose of the podcast, it's kind of like being an author of a book, right? It's not you can write a book that's to the mainstream, to the masses, or you can write a book specifically on your topic. And when somebody's going through that, and all of a sudden they go and they Google how to deal with divorce, and your book comes up as the #1 recommended, book for them to buy. Now they're buying your book. So the podcast is kind of the same thing, where they're listening to your podcast because it's specifically what they're looking for. But this, a community show is going to have people listening all the time, and now they're just aware that you exist. And that's actually more powerful because they might refer you business without
Right.
ever having done business with you, which is
Yeah, I
really
mean,
interesting.
I lived in Charlotte and DeMayo. Like if you ask somebody on the street, I got hit in a car. What do I do? DeMayo. If you're in the Raleigh-Durham area where I am now, you get hit in a car, they're probably going to say Farron, because those people have branded themselves so well. And that's the power of that type of community thing, is you are branding yourself to a point where people can't think of someone else, which, yeah, you can't, it's hard to put a price tag on that.
Yeah. Now the one caveat is who's your market, right? Who's your target? Because if your target is not the mass public, like if say for example, you're an attorney who deals with businesses. Now that might be a bad example because there's a lot of business owners in the community. But it's not like PI or divorce where you're dealing with everybody. Like everybody
Right.
at some point is possible or likely to get into an accident and need a PI attorney, or everybody at some point can potentially be going through a divorce and need a divorce attorney. But a good example might be like a patent attorney, right? A patent attorney, you'd be much better off doing something that's catering to the people who are looking for a patent. And if you do a community show locally in your area, you may never find those people who are looking for a patent because they're not listening to the community show, right? It's just there's not enough of that audience that's listening to it. So you really have to know who your audience is and how am I marketing to them. And the other thing is geography, right? If your firm is not catering specifically to the people in the community, and you have like a nationwide firm, like my friend Sam Malai, who does, his firm does, I think like ITIN number applications and stuff like that. He does that nationally. He doesn't see clients in his office. He doesn't have people, from the neighborhood coming in. So it wouldn't make any sense for him to have a podcast that's specific to his, to his area. So you really have to understand who is my audience and how are they going to look for me, or how are they going to know about me when they need something, to see if it makes sense to do that. Really good stuff. So we talked about whether somebody should start a podcast. We talked about, what it might look like to have somebody produce it for us and run it for us. We talked about the overall type of show. I want to ask specifically about the individual content episode to episode. When it comes to when you're trying to build SEO, you might go and search for what are the keywords that people are looking for? Like, what are the most popular keywords? What are keywords that are less popular but are being searched? Like, I'll have less competition on those keywords. And you might choose to write an article specifically based on the keyword data that you're getting. When it comes to producing a podcast, are you paying attention to that? Are you looking at the SEO information, the keyword information to say, hey, look, this is a topic that we really want to rank for. Let's create a podcast on it so that we now have not just a good podcast episode, but we have one that's strategically going to hopefully help us in the SEO game as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to, if I'm creating that podcast, I'm going to pull the search engine results. I want to see, what are you ranking for? What's your competition ranking for? And what's already on your site? What's existing already? What content can we complement? I also want to have a conversation with the SEO team. What are we doing? What's the strategy here? How can we help you capitalize on your existing SEO spend? And that's a big part of it. Like, we've been talking about injury attorneys. That's a big part of what we do with injury attorneys, is that's really hammering SEO and thinking of what are they trying to rank for? What new thing, the Camp Lejeune thing is the big one right now that the PI attorneys are trying to rank for. We're creating a lot of content around that, linking back to their existing content on their websites. And that is usually step one for a lot of law firms. Is before I even talk to them, I've usually pulled the report already, because I want to come in armed with information. Here's what you're doing. Here's where it looks like you're doing well. It looks like here's something you're chasing. This is a perfect opportunity to build a podcast around this thing that you're chasing. And then start creating that content, thinking of the keywords that we're using, because there's going to be specific phrases that people are searching that we want to make sure we're using. And we use that in the spoken word on the podcast. Google's indexing that themselves in Google Podcast, but we're also transcribing that. That's going to land on the website as well. So there's very much an SEO angle to all of the content we're creating past just giving good answers in audio format that we can then use for other content marketing.
Now, so if somebody's not focusing on SEO before they start, but now they recorded an episode, is there work that we can do post recording to say, okay, let's figure out what title we want to give this episode, and how, what keyword we want to make sure appears multiple times in the blog post because of what this episode has, and now we're backtracking to see, what part of it can show up in search.
Sure. I mean, there's always optimization that can be done on everything that we're doing. We are, I always like to try to stay in my lane the best I can. And so while we understand SEO and we're writing content, especially like we have a higher end package where we're writing SEO content. But for our general podcast episodes, we prefer to work with your existing SEO team to make sure that we're handling it right. But yes, there's very much a way to take 25 episodes you've already done, come back and work on that from an SEO perspective, like optimize that for SEO.
Yeah, I love this the strategy of doing all the things, but it takes a long time to get there. I mean, you need an established marketing team or the right contractors in place, the right companies in place to do it. How does this play out for somebody who's got their own in-house marketing team? Right. And they say, okay, we just want guidance on how to get this going, but we've got the personnel. We don't need you to go and edit our videos. We don't need you to go and, I don't know. I'm not even sure what the whole package of services would be and what they would want to hold on to. But I imagine that if they've got, a CMO and they've got, 3 or 4 underlings below the CMO, all working on their marketing, that they might have enough manpower to be able to do all this on their own, but they just don't know where to start. They just need somebody to kind of like set the plan and direct them on here's how to get guests. Here's how to choose your topics. Here's how to record. Here's how to edit, or maybe you hand off the editing services to an outside editor. Here's how you write a blog post from it. Is that something that you get involved in? What does that look like for our larger firms that might be listening?
We've created, for the most part, we really are here to do production and promotion. That's our strong suit. That's what we do really well. We've created tiers. We have 3 production tiers, 3 promotion tiers, and some firms can fit themselves in that. They'll say, well, we want option 2 here and option 2 here, and then we'll take care of the other things. And that's what that looks like for us is we have a small firm package that works really well for small firms. We have some that, a medium-sized firm might want everything done for them. And then a really large firm might want somewhere in the middle. And that's a lot of that. Now, as far as the consulting goes, we really don't lean into the consulting game. It's just, maybe in the future, but right now we are a production and promotion agency, and consulting really takes our eye off that ball. And not that it's something that we can't help with, but at the end of the day, that's right at this moment isn't the best use of our time. But I'll tell you one thing we discovered as we grew is the medium-sized firms tend to be the ones that sometimes will be more interested in doing things themselves. The large firms, we expected their in-house marketing teams would say, no, we can do some of these things. That has not been our experience. The marketing teams are like, wait, you can do all of this? Please do all of this. We don't need more things. I won't name any names, but I hear that sometimes the in-house teams feel a little bit overworked. And so when we come in with this just complete package, like we're going to give you a calendar to schedule the guest, and we're going to be on the recording to do it for you. And all you have to do is look at the content and make sure that it looks good. They go, yes, please sign us up.
Now let's talk about who's the person behind the microphone. Some people are building their firm. They want the firm to be, that's them, right? It's my firm. I want everybody to know who I am as this attorney. When I run a TV commercial, my face is on that commercial. And then there are other people who recognize that I'm building a firm, and the firm's name is what I want to be out there. I don't want it to have anything to do with me personally, because I want to be able to walk away. I want to be able to sell it. I want to be able to enjoy my life and not have everybody coming and saying, I want to work with you.
Right.
So you can solve that with podcasting and also with blog post writing by having other people on your team be the personalities behind the microphone, where they're not necessarily developing a relationship with one particular person, but rather with the content and the show, and actually having multiple attorneys being on the podcast and talking, or maybe even somebody from the marketing team being involved as a host to have a back and forth conversation. What do you see that people are doing when you're bringing clients on? Is it, for the most part, the owner of the firm is getting behind the microphone, or are you seeing more and more involvement from team members being able to be placed in the spotlight, and also helping the firm, grow their marketing in a different way where it's not tied to a specific individual?
So it varies based on the strategy. Sometimes that strategy is, this is about branding me, especially with a younger attorney who's establishing themselves. Like, we got to brand me. We got to boom, boom, boom and brand me. But for a firm that is much larger than the founding attorney or attorneys, that is something we see a lot, is they're trying to bring people in to highlight them. We want people to know who our attorneys are, because when you call, you're not always going to be able, and rarely are going to be able, to get the name on the door anymore. And so giving those people the ability to get to know your other attorneys, to bring them in, and then it gives the attorneys an ability to start branding themselves, which is hugely important if you're going to actually grow a business, is that your employees are able to generate business themselves outside of your name on the door. And so it runs the gamut, because there are firms where the owner of the firm is the host of every single episode. And then there's some firms where the owner's never on, where it's the name of the firm is this. And sometimes there might be a recurring host. A lot of times there will be. A lot of our firms have a recurring host or hosts that will maybe revolve a little, but there's usually somebody there who's regularly there. And I think a lot of times you're seeing that because in firms, there's usually somebody who's good on the mic, who's personable, who just really has the right attitude. And that's who you see on the mic. Those people who can show up and keep a conversation going. They bring in other people of the firm who might be a little bit more monosyllabic. But I like the power of the recurring host, because it's somebody, if you listen to 5 episodes about 5 different things that you wanted to know about when you showed up, you feel each episode, you're not starting fresh. You're like, oh, right, this guy, I got him. And I think there's power there. I don't think that there's necessarily a right or a wrong answer. I think the biggest thing to making sure you're doing it right is make sure that every episode is thought out, that you're creating something people actually want to know about. If you title it with an SEO title that somebody searched, landed on your website and click play, deliver on that promise. Whoever's on the microphone, deliver on the promise that you made them. Make sure that you're not wandering into left field and talking about things that no one wants to hear about. Don't waste 2 minutes. Make sure you're being succinct with your content. You're being, light, personable. So those are the angles I would go at. So I just gave you the lawyer answer. It depends.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? Marketing, that's the marketing answer too, right? You always ask a marketer any question, and it's always going to be, it depends. And for me also, right, as a business coach and consultant, 99% of the time there isn't a right answer, right? It really is. It depends. But understanding how to navigate that decision is really what this is all about. And that's really why we're here for 45 minutes talking about this, is because somebody needs to figure out, is podcasting for me? Is podcasting for my firm? Is this something that I am excited about, that I see as the next frontier for us when it comes to marketing? And what I really love about podcasting, or starting from podcasting, because what you're doing is you're doing video, you're doing YouTube, right? So why aren't we saying, hey, this is LawTube, or instead of LawPod, right? Really, because what you're doing is, with the podcast, is creating this evergreen content that can be consumed in any way, shape, or form wherever you are. With video, you have to be using your eyes. With audio, you could be doing that at any point, anywhere, with whatever you're doing. But what's really cool is you're taking the audio as the starting point, and then you're saying, okay, while we're doing this, we're going to record video like we're doing right now. And then while we're recording this video, we're also going to write a blog post afterwards that encapsulates the information here. So essentially you're getting all the different things that you would be doing instead of starting from, hey, I'm going to write a blog post and then maybe I'll think about adding a podcast down the road. The other thing, I mean, when you're writing a blog post, you have to be the writer. But when you
Right.
record a podcast episode, anybody can write it based on your episode. So you can have a writer behind the scenes that's writing it that doesn't have to know your content. They don't have to know your stuff to be a good writer for you. They just need to be able to take what you said and turn it into written word. So there's a lot of really, really powerful things that you can do with a podcast that you can't do when you're starting from a blog post or from a, from a video production. Now you could take video and turn it into audio. So I think that they kind of like, if you approach it from, hey, I want to focus on the video and the production value and all that first, and then take that audio track and turn it into an audio podcast, that's also something you can do. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that, whether it loses some of the podcast flavor when you're coming from that, video angle first.
I think it depends on the content, but if you're making a video that is a little bit longer form, that is answering questions, which a lot of firms aren't really doing that. Most of their videos are quick hits, are little 90-second, 3-minute clips. And I get that. Making video is hard. Making really good, high quality production video, where if you're bringing in a team and sitting them in your office, it's hard to get it right. You got you're dressed up perfectly because you're on this video that you're paying $20,000 for, and you are doing these little short hits. And to try to get 8 to 10 to 15 minutes of content in a video is a lot of work and can be really pricey. And that is where the podcast side tends to come out much better, because we're recording the video, but we're recording it on your webcam. And it's the listener understands, the watcher understands that this is something we recorded and are just making available as a podcast. They're used to watching video podcasts. They understand this is more informal. And so, you might have a dress shirt on, but you're talking to your webcam, it's on your branding. And so you're not nearly as concerned with making sure that one hair is right on your head. And you're making podcast content that also plays really well for video. That said, on the video side, if you're making good content that translates well to podcast, I think that's great. Now, for a firm on a budget, I think that that's going to be tough to make that a viable strategy, because making that kind of long form video with high production value does get pricey really quick. Whereas a podcast is probably, I'd guess, 25% of the investment to get all of that content you're getting. So if you're coming from a budget standpoint, podcast is always, I think, going to end up being a more viable option for marketing than going video first.
Yeah, certainly if you're having guests on the show, it becomes harder to control the video of the guest, right? Unless you're sending a video team to the guest to record their side of it. You might have gorgeous video on your end, but then on the other end, they could have a crappy webcam or the built-in camera in their computer, or be using their cell phone on their desk, which some cell phones are actually very, very good, but they might not have the latest and greatest. And and you get what you get. So then it's a whole nother thing you have to stay on top of, as far as, what does our guest have as far as technology? What does their background look like? And now you're doing, pre-show checks and technology checks and all that. So it definitely can add to the complexity of it. I really love, we're out of time. And we probably could go on for hours talking about this, because it's just exciting stuff. But I love that clearly I love podcasting. We're on a podcast, right? We're recording this on a podcast. And, so that's the medium I chose to grow my business. That was the first marketing decision I made, was to start a podcast. And that came from my love of podcasting. But the reality is that I saw all of these pros, and we actually haven't taken our podcast and turned it into a YouTube channel. It is it's a project for us for the upcoming year. My team is, we're laying that project out right now, and we're gonna create a massive presence on YouTube upcoming. I am doing the professional video shoot. I'm gonna have, I'm doing 2 days of professional video, but we're also going back and taking all of our video content that we've recorded since 2019. So the last 3 years, we have a ton of video content, and my team is going to be repurposing that into the YouTube channel. My point is that even if you start with the podcast and you don't do anything with the video, you always have the option of adding that later, or going back and pulling, even blog posts, right? We weren't good at writing blog posts at the beginning. We can always go back and have a writer say, here's the first 100 episodes, go turn them into proper blog posts. Let's replace all of those pages that are just referencing the video, the audio track, and replace it with real content that we can rank for, that people can find when they're searching and find on our website. I think there's on top of that, if you're doing interviews, there's also no replacement to the relationships that can be created through podcast recording. Our first law firm growth summit, we had 35 speakers. How the heck did I find 35 speakers as a newcomer into the industry, right? I was recently just started talking to law firm owners. Where would I come up with those? Well, I had a bunch of guests on the show, and they have a bunch of friends or people that they have established relationships with. It wasn't very difficult to reach out to each of them, who then gave me, hey, here's my 3 best people. Here's my 4 best people that I think that you can connect with. And that circle, all you got to do is ask, right? Once you have that interaction with them on the podcast, what's the next step for our relationship? This was a great conversation, but I really like you. I like what you're doing. How can we work together more? And when you start doing that, well, all of a sudden you build a referral network that's extra gravy on top of whatever you're doing to just have your content there for your website. So I think, anybody who has the time and the money to spend on this type of content marketing, I think it's money well spent, because it's an evergreen. It's a piece of evergreen content. Like it'll never go. Well, I don't know about never, but it's there for the long haul, right? Anybody can find your show, even if you haven't produced it in 10 years, they can still go back and find it. I know. So the person who I use to teach me how to start my podcast, Cliff Ravenscraft, he used to be known as the
podcast answer man.
Podcast answer man. And he's now a business coach. He's changed what he does and how he shows up multiple times. But I took his podcasting A to Z course to learn how to host my own podcast, how to get it published. It's a lot easier today than it was when I first launched, and certainly when he first launched. But the key is that he created a podcast on how to hire a virtual assistant. And it was like a 10 episode show that he never did again. He recorded 10 episodes where he basically walked you through this process, and behind it, he's got some, paid product that you can buy, or I forget exactly how it works, but I spoke to him recently, and he's like, yeah, I recorded that back in, 2007, 2008, and I'm still making sales from that podcast being out there. Like, people are still looking, how do I hire a virtual assistant, and coming and finding my virtual assistant podcast show. And they're just binging the 10 episodes, and boom, they're, so even if you don't continue the strategy ongoing and you just put your stuff out there, it's there forever, and anybody can find it, and anybody can now find you in another way that they couldn't find you before. So really love that. Robert,
yeah,
this has been.
Well, I was just going to say, piggyback on that. Cliff's great. I took his class back in the early years as well, and I know him just from podcast conferencing as well. So that's pretty cool. Did you join the Facebook group for alumni?
I'm sure I'm probably
we're
in
probably
there. I'm
in there
like
together.
a billion Facebook groups. If you're not in a group that you're active in, if you're not active in that group, you forget you're part of it. I should be in there. Probably in there.
We're probably in there together.
We can connect and see.
It.
But yeah, it's a small world. I mean, when you start doing these different pieces of content, these different strategies, you start to pay attention to them, right? Up until now, I only went to legal conferences, but now I'm doing a podcast. Now all of a sudden I'm interested in maybe a podcasting conference, and now I go there, and my world has just expanded, and I'm able to learn what other people are doing and other strategies that they're doing, and things that we can do to make our show better or more exciting. And and there's always variations of how to do something. And some of them are great and some of them are not, but why not learn what other people had success with and what they haven't? So there's a whole world that opens up when you start paying attention to something. It's kind of like I'm shopping for a car. I just took a Honda Pilot for a test drive. I really like the car, and all of a sudden I'm driving and there's Honda Pilots everywhere, right? and that happens, and it happens with everything that you do. It'll happen with podcasting too, where suddenly everybody around you is a podcast host. So Robert, it's been great. We're out of time. I want to leave with two things. So I always end the episode with, how can people find out more about you, connect with you, take a next step with you if they think this is for them? And the first thing is, what is one parting piece of advice or wisdom that you want to leave with our audience? If you have to boil it down to one thing that you can share, what would that be?
Consistency. If you're gonna any marketing strategy that you're working on, you have to look at it not as a quick win. It's not how business works. You have to think, is this the right strategy for me? And when it is, you've got to map out what 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 5 years looks like, and then commit to that consistency on that marketing channel and go for it. That's, having run multiple businesses, some not so well in my life, that was a big lesson I've learned, is you've got to don't just keep bouncing from one thing to the next, hoping something's going to be the quick win. There's almost no quick wins. Find the strategy that works for you and commit to it.
I love that. And how can people find out more about you, take the next step with you?
If you type LawPods anywhere, any social media platform, into Google, you're going to find me. If you want to get directly in contact with me, I'm always happy to get an email, robert@lawpods.com.
Awesome. We're going to link that up in the show notes for you guys. Really great conversation with you, Robert. And the first person on this show that is doing podcast production for lawyers. So you might have competition, but they haven't been here on the Profit with Law podcast. And I love what you're doing. I love podcasting, clearly. And, I definitely think that it's something that every attorney should have on their radar, right? Even if you're not ready to do it now, it should be something that you're thinking, okay, this is going to be something we're going to implement in our marketing one day in the future. Kind of like I am with YouTube, right? I always knew that I needed to be on YouTube. We haven't put the effort in yet, but we're going to be doing it coming 2023. We're going to be launching our YouTube channel, and we're going to put efforts into it and stay consistent with it. I love the advice that you provided with consistency, because when I started the Profit with Law podcast, I knew that the one thing that I needed to do was to be consistent. And there have been occasions here and there where we missed a day, we were a day late, things like that. But by and large, I mean, like, our interviews come out every Thursday, and we've gotten so good with the consistency of it that I know, like, in the summer, I don't want to be recording anything, because I actually take the entire summer off and I go work at my kids' day camp. I want to be out there with them. So we clear my calendar from everything except for my coaching calls. And what that has forced my team to do is to be very prepared, which means that we've got 90 to 120 days batched, completely ready to go when the summer starts. So that, like, right now we're recording in the beginning of September. I'm not sure when this is going to release, but we're now replenishing our supply of inventory of podcast interviews, because I haven't recorded for the last, 9-10 weeks or so, or even 12 weeks. And the other thing is, in order to stay consistent, we started batching. And like, that's today, I've got 5 podcast interviews lined up today, and I'm just going to be behind the microphone all day, clear my calendar. Not
sounds like a good day.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It's exhausting, but it's so emotionally fulfilling, having these conversations, and you being able to not have to think about anything else, and just be in the zone, be in the moment with your guests, and talk to them. And it's just a wonderful experience. One thing that I want to do is broadcast the interviews live as we're recording them. And the problem with that is I don't want to inundate my audience with 5 live broadcasts, an hour long each, in a single day. So we have to figure out how to navigate that. Maybe we take the recording and then play it live as if it's happening at that moment, when it really isn't. But I don't know. We'll see. You're getting a behind the scenes look of what's going on in the Profit with Law world.
I love it. One thing at a time, though. You're doing it. You're like, all right, let's do this now.
Exactly. But the key, but to your point, the key is consistency, right? So you always want to make sure that you're not taking on more than you can handle so that you can be consistent. Like that's the name of the game. And I learned that from Cliff from day one. He harped on it. And I actually did start another podcast and was not consistent with it. And it was very difficult. It was difficult to grow it. It was very difficult to get behind the microphone and do it again, right? It was like, because you start playing mind games with yourself. It's kind of like if you go on a diet and then you have a cheat, right? So you have one cheat. It's like, okay, I shouldn't have done that. I'm gonna get back into it. But then all of a sudden you start playing mind games with yourself. Like, oh, if I was able to do that and get back on it, I could do another one, and I could, and all of a sudden
off the wagon,
right? And same thing with podcasting, right? If you skip one episode, you shame on you the first time, and then all of a sudden you start making excuses for yourself, and now you start skipping more consistently, and you become consistent with the inconsistency, which is a problem. It becomes very difficult to grow it, to capture an audience that way. So I really like that. The last thing that I'm going to share, just put some food for thought in somebody's mind. Like if you don't want to be on the hamster wheel of content production all the time, you also have the option of doing seasons. So you can say like, okay, we're going to release a series of podcast episodes in the spring, and then we're going to take off until the next spring. But we're going to just tell our audience that's what we're doing. So season 1 is going to be running now. Like if you look at, I don't know, the Grey's Anatomy, right? Like there's a season every year, but you got to wait till September to watch it. And then come March, it's over. And you don't get any new content from March until September. And you just got to deal, right? But you know what to expect. There's no surprises. And I think that's really the key. So there aren't any rules, but communication and planning and letting people know what you're doing is really key. So we're going to link up in the show notes Robert's email, his website, his social handles. We invite you to have conversations with him, talk to him directly if you're looking to start a podcast. And again, I'm just going to throw out there, if you want to grab a free coaching session with one of our coaches here at Profit with Law, we make that available to you. Go to profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. We'd love to have you in there, have a conversation with one of our coaches and help you see what you're not seeing in your business and really start up leveling and moving forward, especially if you feel like you've been kind of treading water, not going anywhere. They definitely can help you pinpoint why that's happening and set you in the right direction. Folks, we're here every Thursday with a new interview, a new guest, an amazing guest. Robert's been great, and we're going to bring more for you next Thursday. So make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast. Hit that subscribe button in your podcast player, and we will catch you next week. Take care. That's it for this week's episode of Profit with Law. If you have enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with at least one person. Imagine how many lives we can change if we each shared this episode. Another way to share the episode is on social media. We appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us again next week.